Before we dive deeper into this chilling royal mystery, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the shocking revelations that could change everything you thought you knew about the royal family. Trust me, this story is about to take a twist no one saw coming. In the last few minutes, chaos erupted within the royal palace. The serene, controlled environment that had always been a hallmark of the monarchy suddenly descended into utter disarray. Royal aides, who were usually poised and in command of every situation, were now seen hastily pulling heavy curtains across windows, their hands trembling as they worked with a sense of urgency that was foreign to the calm, polished routine of royal life. Their faces were grim, their eyes betraying a deep sense of dread, as though they could already sense the gravity of what was unfolding. The press, who had been eagerly awaiting their next royal update, stood frozen in confusion, their cameras and pens now useless in the face of an unfolding emergency they hadn't been prepared for. The usual hum of activity that surrounded the palace had evaporated, replaced by a suffocating silence, an unsettling stillness that hung in the air like a thick fog. It wasn't just the quiet that was troubling, it was the weight of the moment, a palpable tension that seemed to deepen with every passing second. An unspoken truth, one far more significant than anyone had imagined, loomed over them, thickening the atmosphere with an ominous sense of impending disaster. And then from the shadows of the private corridors of the palace, Prince William emerged. But this was not the poised, confident future monarch that the world had grown accustomed to seeing. His regal composure, his usual calm presence was completely shattered. His face, once accustomed to bearing the weight of responsibility with grace, was now pale, drained of all color. His eyes, which had always held a sense of steadiness, were wide, frantic, darting around the room as if he were searching for some kind of anchor, some way to steady himself in the face of an overwhelming storm. His body, usually strong and composed, was trembling with an unmistakable fear. It was a fear that had nothing to do with his royal duties, nothing to do with his future as the king. It was a father's fear, raw and desperate for the life of his child. Prince William was no longer the heir to the throne. In this moment, he was simply a father torn apart by the very real possibility that he might lose his son. The whispers began to circulate almost immediately among the royal staff. As aides exchanged anxious glances, their faces etched with worry. There was no need to speak the words aloud, they all felt it, the suffocating weight of the situation. The tragedy unfolding before them wasn't just about Prince Louis's sudden and alarming health scare, they whispered. It was something far deeper, something far more dangerous. The murmurs grew louder as the staff exchanged fragmented theories. It wasn't just a medical crisis. It was tied to something that had been buried for decades, a secret so powerful and so dangerous that it had been kept hidden from the world for a lifetime. And yet now, as if the universe itself had conspired to bring it into the light, that secret was stirring, waking from its long slumber. The source of this secret, Princess Diana. The woman whose presence still haunted every corner of the monarchy, even years after her tragic death. They all knew that Diana's life and her legacy had been marred by whispers of hidden truths, by mysteries that had never been fully explained. The conspiracy surrounding her death, the questions about her relationships and the secrets she carried, those things had remained just beyond the reach of public scrutiny. But this was different. This was far more than a mere piece of gossip or royal intrigue. This was a truth so potent, so explosive, that it could not only tear apart the fragile veneer of the royal family's carefully curated image, but it could threaten the very foundations of the monarchy itself. The thought was enough to freeze everyone in place. Was the monarchy truly prepared for the truth that had been buried for so long to come to the surface? The implications of what they were facing were staggering. It wasn't just the life of a child that hung in the balance, it was the very stability of the royal bloodline, the future of the crown, and perhaps the entire institution itself. What had Diana known? What was she hiding, and why had it been kept from the world? These were the questions that now danced in the minds of everyone present in that room. And in the distance, the shadow of something far more ominous loomed larger with every passing second. The truth, they realized, was not just a family secret, it was a royal one, and it could change everything. Before we delve into the heart of this mystery, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss a single update on this unfold. In crisis. The events that followed came without warning. One moment, the palace functioned as it always had, calm, routine, and as structured as ever. The carefully choreographed dance of royal life with its traditions and expectations hummed in the background, familiar and predictable. But the very next moment, that steady rhythm was shattered like glass. Phones that had been ringing steadily, signaling the ongoing flow of royal business, fell silent, a deafening quiet settling over the entire palace. The halls, which were normally filled with the bustle of staff and aides moving efficiently through their duties, suddenly felt unnervingly empty. Doors, once open and welcoming, now slammed shut with alarming force, cutting off the usual channels of communication. Senior advisors, those who had spent hours preparing their statements for the public, were seen abandoning their words mid-sentence, as if the very act of speaking had become dangerous. In just a few short moments, the carefully curated social media accounts of the royal family, which had been meticulously planned and scheduled for weeks, went eerily quiet. Posts that had been set to go live vanished without explanation, their absence just as telling as if they had been erased from history. To seasoned royal watchers, this sudden, profound silence was more telling than any official announcement could have been. It wasn't just a delay in communication. It was a calculated attempt to contain a crisis of unimaginable scale, one that could shake the monarchy to its core. Behind the palace's grand, imposing walls, a level of urgency unfolded that was nothing short of extraordinary. An emergency medical team was summoned with a speed and intensity that spoke volumes. This wasn't just about a royal figure being attended to for routine care, it was about something much more dire. Something had gone terribly wrong with Prince Louis, a child whose life had been carefully shielded from the public eye, kept out of the harsh scrutiny of the press. He had always been the protected one, his every step watched and guided by the strict protocols that govern the lives of royal children. But now something had shifted. Eyewitnesses who saw Prince William emerge from a secured room were struck by how completely his composure had fractured. The prince, so often the picture of control, now appeared every bit the father he was, a father who was powerless in the face of a crisis. His usually strong, steady hands trembled with the weight of his fear. His eyes, which had always exuded confidence, now refused to meet anyone's gaze, as though they couldn't bear to confront the reality of what was happening. This was not the controlled grief of a future king preparing himself for duty. It was the raw, unfiltered terror of a father who had no control over the fate of his child. Kate Middleton's absence, too, only deepened the sense of unease that had begun to take root. There was no public reassurance, no carefully composed statement to the press, no sign of the poised, ever-composed Duchess that the public had come to know. Instead, there was only silence. Whispers began to spread throughout the palace corridors. Some claimed that Kate had already been by Louis's side, refusing to leave him even as the palace descended into chaos. She had ignored every royal protocol, every piece of advice from the palace's advisors, and had chosen her maternal instinct over any image or public duty. In this moment, she was no longer the Duchess of Cambridge. She was simply a mother, fiercely protecting her son, unwilling to be swayed by the cold, calculating forces of the royal institution. She would remain by Louis's side no matter what the cost. The public could wait, the monarchy could wait, her child could not. As the palace's halls grew quieter, the weight of the moment became almost unbearable. Royal aides, those who had seen countless crises in their careers, now found themselves caught in a storm of uncertainty. This was no ordinary royal emergency. This was something that would forever alter the course of history. Behind closed doors, the crisis meetings were growing longer, their discussions more urgent. The usual staff who would have been expected to maintain composure were instead scrambling to respond to a situation far beyond their control. The palace, an institution that had thrived on tradition and precision, was now faced with a moment of existential peril. No one had anticipated this, least of all Prince William, who had always been so composed in public and private. The realization began to sink in. This wasn't merely a scare or an incident that could be managed. This was something that involved more than just Louis's health. It involved the very foundation of the monarchy itself. Behind the closed doors, whispers grew louder, although only a select few were privy to the full extent of the danger. The medical team had grown increasingly concerned, but they were operating under a veil of secrecy. There was no question that Louis's condition was severe, but as more details emerged, it became clear that what was happening had far deeper implications. It wasn't simply a matter of medical care. It was the culmination of years of royal history, long-held secrets, and a crisis that had been building in the shadows for decades. The advisors and doctors in the room began to piece things together, their faces growing more drawn with each passing moment. This wasn't a normal medical protocol. This wasn't a simple case of a child falling ill. It was something far more complicated, something that involved an entirely different layer of the royal family's past, one that had been carefully swept under the rug, buried in dusty files, and locked away behind layers of legal firewalls. But now that past was rearing its ugly head, forcing the palace to confront a secret so monumental, so terrifying that even the royal advisors were at a loss for how to handle it. As the minutes ticked by, the situation was becoming increasingly critical. Senior aides, those who had spent their lives in the service of the monarchy, now found themselves in a position they had never imagined, one where their loyalty to the crown was pitted against their loyalty to the truth. There was a growing understanding that the health scare involving Louis wasn't the end of the crisis, it was merely the beginning. The ramifications of what was happening were far more extensive than anyone had anticipated. For the first time in royal history, the lines between personal duty and public duty were no longer clear. Everything that had been carefully planned, calculated, and structured for centuries was now under threat. The hidden fears, the buried truths were coming to the surface. And then, as if the gravity of the moment wasn't enough, it became clear that this was no isolated incident. Louis's illness had triggered something much larger. As the protocol that had been dormant for over 2 decades was activated, whispers spread among the highest echelons of power. The protocol was one that had been created in response to a past crisis, one that until now had been buried in the vaults of royal history, forgotten by most, but known to a select few. Its reactivation could mean only one thing: something had gone terribly wrong. The doctors and advisors in the room exchanged knowing glances, the truth dawning on them like a shadow falling across the room. This wasn't about Louis's health alone. It was about something far more dangerous, far more insidious. The truth that had been hidden for so long, the secret that had been sealed away, was now resurfacing. The protocol wasn't just about dealing with a royal heir's medical condition. It was about protecting the monarchy from a truth that had the potential to unravel everything. What was happening now in the royal palace's most secure rooms was not just a matter of life and death. It was a matter of legacy, survival, and the very nature of the crown itself. As the medical team worked with feverish intensity to stabilize Louis, royal advisors scurried to deal with the fallout from this revelation. It was becoming clear that the consequences of this crisis extended far beyond the walls of the palace. The monarchy, built on centuries of tradition, was now facing its most significant test. No one was sure how it would end, but one thing was certain: the repercussions would be felt far beyond the confines of Buckingham Palace. If the secret that had been hidden for so long came to light, it could destroy everything. And as the palace scrambled to contain the situation, there was a deep realization among the royal advisors. This was not just a political crisis, it was personal. For Prince William, it was not only the health of his child that he was fighting to protect, it was the very legacy of his family and the monarchy itself that now hung in the balance. And that something had to do with Princess Diana, the woman whose very name had sparked endless fascination, both for her life and her tragic death. Diana was far more than just a royal icon. She was a woman who, behind her beauty and grace, carried with her a secret that would ultimately alter the course of history. A secret so dangerous, so potent, that it had been deliberately erased from all official archives. The highest powers within the monarchy had worked tirelessly to bury this truth, hoping it would vanish into the shadows, hidden from public view forever. But Diana, with all her strength and foresight, had ensured that this secret would not be lost to time. In the weeks leading up to her tragic death, she had taken drastic measures, making a clandestine trip to Geneva, a city known for its global medical institutions, where she met with a renowned geneticist under the alias Elizabeth C. Hart. This wasn't a routine medical consultation. It was driven by a deep and abiding fear, not of curiosity or vanity. Diana had sensed something was wrong, something within her body that felt foreign, something so unusual that it worried her profoundly. It wasn't just about her own health. Diana feared it could also affect her children, her beloved sons William and Harry. The monarchy's future depended on them, and yet now Diana had to face the haunting uncertainty of what might be lurking beneath her own skin. In that moment of fear and foreboding, Diana had written a letter to a trusted confidant, a letter that would remain hidden among her private belongings, locked away for years until it was finally uncovered after her death. The contents of that letter would send a ripple through history, echoing through the halls of Buckingham Palace in ways no one could have predicted. She wrote, "They'll come for this the moment I'm gone, because what's inside me may change everything they've built." The words were cryptic, chilling in their simplicity. Diana wasn't just concerned about her own life, she was worried about the legacy she had given birth to, the fragile institution that had become her family. And at the center of her worries was something far greater than her own mortality: the blood she shared with her children, the very same blood that connected them to a royal lineage stretching back for centuries. In a final act of defiance and protection, Diana enclosed that letter with something even more significant: a vial of her blood, her DNA. But this wasn't for medical research, nor was it meant to be preserved for posterity. It was not for any scientific purpose. It was for protection, an insurance policy against a future that Diana feared might be shaped by forces she couldn't control. The vial, containing her genetic material, was sealed away in a secure facility in Switzerland. There, under the strictest confidentiality, it was tagged, frozen, and hidden behind layers of misdirection, fake identities, and legal barriers. No one was supposed to know about it, let alone find it. The very existence of the vial was meant to be a secret within a secret, protected by layers of intricacy and deception. But Diana, ever aware of the world around her, knew that secrets as powerful as this one could never remain hidden forever. In her own way, she had taken steps to ensure that the truth of what lay within her blood could one day be revealed, if it ever became necessary. Days after her untimely death, rumors began to swirl. Whispers surfaced about the palace's efforts to retrieve certain private medical records from Diana's life, records that had been carefully guarded, locked away in the deepest vaults of royal privacy. On the surface, the public assumed this was just about privacy, a typical royal concern over maintaining appearances, shielding the family from any further public scrutiny. But those closest to the situation knew the truth was far darker, more complex, and far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Leaked documents revealed that within days of Diana's death, high-ranking British officials had reached out to Swiss authorities, demanding the immediate return of all medical specimens related to Subject D. The cryptic reference was meant to shield the identity of Diana, but the intent was clear. The monarchy wanted its hands on everything connected to her, especially the vial of blood that had been preserved in secrecy. But by the time these requests were made, the vial was no longer in Switzerland. Someone loyal to Diana had moved it, taking it into their own hands, believing that the monarchy had no right to claim every last part of her life, her legacy, or her blood. Whoever had taken it had done so under the belief that the truth Diana had left behind was hers to protect, and no royal institution, no matter how powerful, could claim ownership of it. The vial and the secrets it contained had already been hidden once again, deeper than before, its fate now in the hands of those who would never be swayed by the monarchy's demands. As the years passed, the contents of the vial remained an enigma, a mystery that continued to haunt the royal family. Despite their best efforts, the truth remained elusive, hidden behind layers of secrecy and mistrust. But that truth, the one that could have shattered everything the monarchy stood for, was never far from the surface. It lingered, waiting for the right moment, when the world would be ready to face the consequences of what had been hidden away for so long. Years passed, and the files remained sealed, locked away in the deepest recesses of royal archives, untouched by all but the most trusted hands. The monarchy, with all its power and influence, had succeeded in keeping the secret buried, hidden from the public eye. But inside that vial, tucked away in the secure vaults of Switzerland, something had been preserved, something that could never be erased, no matter how hard they tried to forget it. What had been contained within the blood of Princess Diana was not a disease, nor a flaw, as some might have hoped. It was something far more perplexing, an anomaly that did not align with traditional royal medical expectations. It was neither a hereditary condition nor a genetic defect. It was simply unknown, an enigma that defied medical explanation. For decades, this anomaly remained just that, a mystery. The vial had been sealed away, its contents left untouched as the monarchy moved forward, seemingly unscathed by the dark secret it held. The blood, frozen in time, remained in a state of preservation, hidden away, forgotten by all but a few. The royal family and the elite medical experts who served them had been trained to ignore it, to disregard its existence as if it were an inconvenient piece of history that had no place in the modern world. But as time wore on, as Louis's health began to deteriorate in ways that no one could explain, the long-forgotten vial began to demand attention. As Louis's symptoms grew increasingly bizarre, the royal doctors were forced into a corner. Desperate for answers, they began to dig into the files they had been warned never to touch, the records that had been buried in the past, the documents marked with the highest level of confidentiality, the ones that held secrets they were never meant to uncover. As they opened those files, the truth emerged in a way no one could have anticipated. It wasn't just a historical footnote. It wasn't a relic of the past meant to stay buried. What had been erased from history was now front and center once more. The name that had been carefully expunged from the public record, Princess Diana's name, suddenly reappeared with startling clarity. Her DNA, once hidden in the shadows, now stood as the only possible explanation for Louis's strange and inexplicable symptoms. The doctors, having long been instructed to avoid any mention of Diana's bloodline, were now faced with an undeniable truth. The anomaly she carried in her DNA had been passed on to her grandson. It wasn't a disease. It wasn't a genetic flaw. It was something different, something that had been overlooked for years because no one had known to look for it. And now, the same genetic anomaly that had haunted Diana was showing its effects in Louis. The connection was undeniable, and yet the mystery only deepened. In the sealed rooms of the palace, the truth began to seep through the cracks. The medical experts who had once dismissed the connection between Diana's blood and Louis's health now found themselves unable to ignore the evidence. What had once been a hidden part of royal history was now the key to unlocking the crisis unfolding before them. Louis's condition, far from being an isolated medical issue, was part of a much larger, more intricate puzzle, one that had its roots in the royal family's very bloodline. For years, the monarchy had done everything in its power to protect its image, to ensure that its legacy remained untarnished. Secrets were buried, lies were told, and uncomfortable truths were swept under the rug. But now, as Louis's health took a terrifying turn, the royal family was forced to confront the reality of what they had long tried to suppress. The blood that ran through their veins, once seen as a symbol of power, unity, and stability, was now a source of fear, uncertainty, and danger. As the doctors gathered their findings and began to piece together the puzzle, the gravity of the situation became clear. They had no choice but to confront the secret that had been hidden for decades. The royal family's past was now inextricably linked to its future. The bloodline that had been so carefully protected, the legacy that had been so meticulously curated, was now at the center of a crisis that could threaten everything. And in that moment, as the weight of the monarchy's future hung in the balance, the truth about Diana's legacy, the very thing that had been buried in silence, was about to come to light. The world, for better or worse, was about to learn what the royal family had so desperately tried to keep hidden. This is where the story gets even more intense, and we're just getting started. Make sure to subscribe now to be part of the journey as we continue to uncover more shocking details that could bring the monarchy to its knees. Don't forget to like and share this video with your friends. Trust me, you'll want them to know what happens next. Stay tuned, because the truth is about to unfold, and it's bigger than anything we've ever seen.